a linear approximation, that page. So I pull up the whiteboard so that we could go over this one together one more time. Okay, so if we think about, okay, so so the so the so the basic part of the UIP and the CIP is just two equations, right? So CIP is what's the CIP's formula? Remember, you have a two choice, right? One is to deposit your asset in a domestic bank, and then you could also deposit your asset in a foreign bank as well, right? But this, you have to go through two times of converting your currency, right? Before you deposit your dollars into European banks, you need to convert it, right? You have to sell your dollar into euro, right? So if you have $1, this is amount of the money, amount of the euro that you could get, right? And if we write it reciprocally, it's equal to this, right? So this is the first part of the, if we talk about the CIP, right? And then you convert your dollar into Europe and you deposit in a European bank. This is the interest rate you will get over a year, right? But once you get the money after 1 year, this is still in Europe, right? So you need to convert it back to dollar by times the forward interest rate. Right? So basically this is the idea of covered interest parity, which we call CIP, right? So we need to know the forward interest rate, exchange rate. So what's the forward? Sorry, this is forward exchange rate. What is the meaning of the forward exchange rate? It means the exchange rate in the future, right? And this is something we have to assume that we know, right? So this is known variables here. Okay, so this is the meaning of the CIP. And then what is the uncovered interest parity? The only difference between those two parities is instead of using the forward exchange rate, instead of using forward exchange rate in uncovered interest parity, I substitute my expectation of the interest rate to the forward exchange rate, right? So this is the expected exchange rate, right? So the mechanism is the same, right? You have two choices. One is to deposit your dollars into the domestic bank so that you get the returns. It's here. So this is your principal, this is your interest, right? Then you have the second choice. Remember the BCD route in the graph in chapter 13, right? So you could convert your dollar into the euro first. Now you have this amount of the euro. Then you invested in a European bank. After 1 year, this is the return you will get in Europe. Right? So you will get your principal in Europe, you will get your interest in Europe. But how do you compare with your original return and you put it into the domestic bank? You have to convert it back, right? But this time, because it's uncovered interest parity, means that I don't know the forward interest rate. Oh, sorry, I keep saying interest rate. Forward exchange rate. So I need to put an expectation in my exchange rate. So superscript E here, right? And this is equal to this. Okay, so this, if you organize it, this becomes this, which is the uncovered interest parity, right? Right? So this is the normal one, right? So sometimes this is called absolute CIP or UIP. But now if you want to do the relative one, you want to see if the exchange rate change, what happened will, like this term, if the exchange rate change. Right? So if you know this term, can you interpret the differences between the domestic interest rate and the foreign interest rate? So how do we use that to find out how much money we can expect to receive? Okay, so just give me a second. Let me derive the approximation formula first, and I will go back to the question. Okay, basically you just need to apply the approximation formula. That's it. Emily, just give me 1 second, okay? Okay, so this is UIP. All right, so how do we figure out the approximation? So if I have, can I erase it? Okay, so if I have the UIPs like this, plus, right? So the first step I need to do is to use the algebra to manipulate the last term, right? So last term could be write as this, right? So this, if we expand the last term, this will equal to denominator remain the same, right? Use the common denominator. So you cancel all those two terms. So this reduced to the original UIP, right? And then we give this one we give this one another notation, which is the beginning step of the approximation. This one we call it this, right? So basically I use delta E sub E, right? Expectation of the exchange rate between dollar and euro change, right? So change in the expectation of the exchange rate between dollar and euro. Okay? So this one in the book it called expected rate of the appreciation of the dollar, right? If you think about it, if this term is larger than zero, means expectation of the exchange rate in the future, it's larger than the original exchange rate, right? Than the original exchange rate. If the value of the exchange rate increase, that means this domestic dollar depreciate against the foreign dollar, right? That's the reason why you got this net expected rate of depreciation of the dollar. Okay, so approximately how do we do so? So then we just expanded the equation, right? So from this to this, there's supposed to be no problem, right? You just simply apply the law of the distribution, right? So we know that the interest rate usually is a very small number, and the change in percentage of the exchange rate usually is a very small number as well. So if I have a very small number times a very small number, this one will be very, very small. So the last term will become a very, very small number, just close to zero. So that's the reason why I could get rid of this one. So the equation of the CIP use approximation method. It's like this. Last thing, if I cancel out the 1 in the left hand side and right hand side, I could know that the expected rate of the depreciation of the dollar is equal to the interest rate in the US minus the interest rate in euro. Okay, so if you use this logic in the question 5 in the homework assignment, it all of the idea are the same, right? It just changed to that what is the home country right now? So a Korean investors. So now the home country become Korea, and the foreign country become Japan. Instead of using a dollar and euro as home and foreign country. Now I use Korea won and Japanese yen as two different currency, right? So how do you calculate out the return on the Korean won? So this is the approximation of the UIP, right? Okay, let me run me off a space. So can I erase it? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for the reply. Okay, so this is what I get, right? If you refer to the second to the last page of last week's slides, this is what I get. Right? But now the first question asks you what? Does covered interest parity hold in this example? So all you need is to change this one to this. And this become forward exchange rate minus right? And that's equal to this minus this. Okay, and now the only thing we need to do is to change dollar by won, right? Because now the home country is not US anymore. Now the home country is Korea. And the foreign country is Japan. Right? So now you just move the sign, right? So forward exchange rate between won and yen minus spot exchange rate between won and yen divided by the exchange rate between won and yen. That is equal to the deposit rate of the won minus the interest rate for yen. Right? And what is the last step you need to do? You need to find out what's the deposit return. Right? So that's the deposit return in Korea. That's equal to this plus right? If the CIP hold. Okay, so this will be your return in Korea. The context of the question is we are looking at the Korean investors. So Korea is supposed to be the domestic country and Japan is supposed to be the foreign country. Right? So everything's remain the same. You just need to apply this formula into this context. And then you just compare the questions give you the information that question give you and the one that you calculate out, if those two return are the same, If they are the same, the CIP is supposed to hold. If they are not the same, the CIP is supposed fail. If you take a look at the question, do we have the information of the deposit rate in Japan? Which we did, right? So this is equal to 3.75%. We have the forward exchange rate here. Right, so Chen already tell me it's 8.2 exactly. So 8.2. Do I have the spot exchange rate here? It's equal to 8, right? And then here's 8. So after the calculation, compare with the information you have, can you find out the CIP hold or not? That's basically the question number 5A. Okay? Is this clear? Yeah, Jake.
So it's clear. Yeah, I agree with Peter. It's more clear. But for me, I don't think it's the understanding of the equation, because I read the textbook back and front. I read the power parents back and front. So I understand that concept. What's frustrating for me is the application of the equations, because as I said, I did it in the homework and I wanted to confirm with you if this was correct, and I got a whole new set of ways to solve it, at least for me, right? So the problem is not how to set up the equation, but it's how to, I guess it's the problem for me is how to input everything correctly and then solve for the correct answer. That's what I'm having problems solving. So it's not so much the abstract like what we have here, it's more of application. So I know we have to move on because I don't want to take up, especially I don't want to speak for the class, but I think on Thursday when you have yours, I'll have some problems, and I would like to go over with you how to actually input everything correctly and then solve, for X. Solve for.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Right now, again, I'm new to this, so I'm not bashful about that. So I saw one thing that I was doing wrong was I was putting 1, because it says in the textbook 1 plus exchange rate 1, for example. So I would put in, or for the yen, I would put in 1 plus 3.75%.
I see. So it's here, right? So here, 1 plus. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
But I was saying that's one thing that I'm doing wrong, because I'm not exactly understanding. Now I understand. I'm like, okay, the 1 doesn't need to be there because that's just the abstract of it. We're actually just looking at the exchange rate. 3.75. Got it.
Yeah, maybe I need to revert. Yeah. I know. I know where's your problem is. Maybe I need to put the use the linear approximation for UIP and CIP in the first sentence of the question. That might make the question more clear, right?
So I think the part that made sense for me, all of this makes sense. It's just that in the lectures and in the textbook, the linear approximation for CIP is never given. We didn't go over that one. We did go over the linear approximation for UIP.
UIP, yeah.
But we didn't do for CIP. So initially, I was doing the same thing as Jacob. I was putting that 1 plus thing, which is not the linear approximation, but I just didn't know what the linear approximation was for it, because we had only done the UIP one, not the CIP one.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
So I understand this, Jeffrey. Maybe on Thursday I will have some, I'll do some more work on it and then come to you and be like, can I actually just work this with you? You know what I mean? I'll do it. Yeah. Sit there and make sure that, basically I have my water wings in the pool and you just make sure I'm floating correctly through. Okay.
Okay, yeah. But I hope the explanation right now make you feel more comfortable of the idea. Basically, in this one, the approximation of the UIP and CIP, they are the same. The differences between the UIP and the CIP is just the forward exchange rate and the expected exchange rate. Right, so if you think about that point and then apply to the idea of the approximation, and then go to this question. Just switch your role from the U.S. to like the home country is the U.S. and the foreign country is Euro, to the context in the question that the home country is Korea and then the foreign country is Japan. That this was supposed to be okay, but that's the goal of the homework problem. Like that's just let me know like which part I need to explain more, or like which part the students still have the question. So yeah, it's great to have some of the feedback for like which part I need to enhance the explanation. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, Emily.
Yeah, I just don't quite understand how we're supposed to use the equation and everything that we just went over to get the answers to A and B. The answer 5A and 5B, I mean, parts A and B.
So yeah, so 5A is just all the equation you need is here.
So how do we
It's
put
here.
the numbers in that are given? I'm sorry, I really don't understand how we putting in the numbers.
So okay, hold on. So I have now the goal for me is to calculate out the return on the Korean won, right? And I have the information of the return on the Japanese yen. And I have the information of the forward exchange rate, spot exchange rate between those two currencies. So all the information I already have. Oopsie. So okay, so let's go over. So what's the return, the deposit interest rate on the in the Japanese bank? So interest rate. This is equal to, in a question, this is equal to 3.75%. Right? Okay, so our goal is try to calculate out the return of the Korean won under the CIP. Right, so now the first term, I already have the number in the question. Okay, the second term, it's this one. The change rate of the exchange rate between Korean won and Japanese yen. Right? So in the question, do I know the information of this? What is the forward exchange rate for Korean won against Japanese yen? That's equal to 8.2, right? So that means what? In the future, the market believes that 1 unit of the Japanese yen could exchange for 8.2 unit of Korean won. Right, so remember the forward exchange rate means the future exchange rate. Right, whereas the spot exchange rate is the immediate exchange rate between those two currencies. So do we have the information on spot exchange rate between Korean and Japanese yen? So the answer is yes, right? So we have 8. Right? So now if the CIP holds, this one approximation will hold, right? So the return of the Korean won will be this number. That's equal to 3.75% plus 8.2 minus 8 divided by 8 times 100%. Right, so if you calculate out, this is equal to 3.75% plus 0.2 divided by 8. That's equal to 2.5%. Right? So that's equal to equal to 5, 2. Right. So is this one, hold on, Jacob, is this one equal to the information I have right now? What is the deposit rate right now? Right, so the CIP holds or not. So yeah, it does. That's it. So this is the information I have in the question, right? And this is the one I just calculate out by the approximation formula. They are identical. So that this tells me that CIP holds. Is this clear? Yeah, Jake, yeah.
Jeffrey, yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about, because as you were just doing that, I already saw my mistake. It's not that I didn't understand the problem. I was putting something in incorrectly. That's it.
Good.
That's the only thing.
Good. It's good. You should try it. You should try it by yourself, and then you figure out which part you make the mistake, and then that's how you learn it.
I'll go back and do the other ones, but I already know where to make it. I
will assign additional question in the end of the chapter today, and then I will post the answer key over the weekend so that you could have more practice. That's totally fine with me. Sure. Is that okay? Emily, is that okay? Is that also the expected return? Yes. Yes. That is called expected return. I hope this is clear. Okay? All right? Good. So we move on to chapter 14, PPP, monetary approach of the exchange rate. Okay? 5B is the similar idea. Homework 5B is similar idea. It just changed CIP to UIP. That's it. Everything is the same. So what do you need to apply in the UIP approximation formula? Instead of using forward exchange rate, you need to use, in UIP, you need to use the expected exchange rate between those two currency, right? And the information is given to you in the question as well. So you should be able to see if UIP holds. Okay? All right, so let's move on to chapter 14, the PPP. Any question? Yeah, any question? Before we move on, any question? Okay? Okay. So, just a little bit of a recap. What do we learn in chapter 13? We learn what's the appreciation and the depreciation of the exchange rate between two currency, right? And the exchange rate could represent by this format, or it could represent by this format. And they are reciprocal with each other, right? Okay, this is the first part. The second part, we learn that there are two kinds of the regimes of the exchange rate. One is called fixed. One is called float. Right? And the third part, we learn the basic idea of arbitrage. Right? So what's the meaning of the arbitrage? Means people run from the market that they could get the goods with a lower price, and to sell it, exactly. Thank you, Chenxing. Buy low and sell high, right? And then they could get the goods with the lower price in one of the market and then sell it to another market which have a higher price. So they will have the margin to gain the profit, right? So we know the basic idea of the arbitrage. This is the mechanism that we use in international finance. Right? Which means this is usually people do with buying the foreign currencies. Okay, and then we discuss several of the derivative, like, for example, what's the swap contract? What's future contract? What's option? Right? But the only thing that we know, like the only thing we need to know more deeply here is the future contract, right? Means you negotiate a price, but the settlement date is in the future. So by knowing this, we know the future exchange rate between two currency. If we know this, we know the relationship between the future and the spot exchange rate and the two countries' interest rate, right? And this is called covered interest parity. Whereas if we're using the expect exchange rate in the future, this is called the uncovered interest parity. Right? So one thing play an important role is the exchange rate and the interest rate, domestic and foreign. Right? So now we are moving to the chapter of what about the price level? The price level of the two countries, would that affect the exchange rate or not? Okay, so let's take a look at the introduction. So the goal of this chapter, right? So what's the chapter's topic? Monetary approach in the long run, right? So we need to know how the exchange rate was determined. We know UIP and CIP, right? CIP and UIP, and this is because the arbitrage behavior on the market, right? So arbitrage behavior will give us the equilibrium in the model. But in the long run, could we know more of the determination of the exchange rate? How the policy in two different countries will affect the exchange rate of their currency. That's the goal of this chapter. Okay? So, the long run relationship between money, okay, price, and exchange rate. So you will see P shows up a lot here. So if we only take a look of the only individual one good, okay, that's called a law of the one price. That means the goods that sell in different countries, their real price, okay, their real price, or price in the same currency, ultimately has to be the same. Okay? Okay, so let's go over the slides together. So the first involved the theory of purchasing power. Okay, so this is the PPP and the law of the one price loop. First involved the theory of purchasing power, linking the exchange rate to price level in each country in the long run. Okay, remember it's in the long run. Okay, and secondly, we need to know, once we know the PPP, the idea of PPP, the first question we want to ask is, how do the country's price level determine? All right, so how the price levels determine in the country? All right, and lastly, we combine the monetary policy and the PPP. We could know one of the important idea in the international finance is the Fisher equation or Fisher effect. So this will link the exchange rate and inflation. That's the structure of this long chapter. Each of the idea could, takes a lot of time to explain. Okay. So, as I said in the beginning, arbitrage can occur in international good market, right? So, if the goods, its price, it's different in different markets, people always has the incentive to buy the cheaper goods, right? To buy the goods in a cheaper way and to sell it into the more expensive market. For example, if an apple, okay, the real fruit, the apple, the same fruit in the United States, it's more expensive than in the Europe. People will try to buy the apples in the Europe right? Because its price is lower, and to sell it to the US market so that they could have the margin, they could have the profit, right? But by doing so, because the demand of the Europeans' apples increase and the supply of the American US apples increase, so that the price they will adjust, and the price between the two countries they will convert with each other in the long run, right? Think about that. If all the apples from the Europe are importing to the US, now you have more same apples on the market. So now the supply curve of the apples will shift to the right, right? So supply curve shift to the right, so that the price will decrease, right? On the other hand, because a lot of people, a lot of the businessmen, entrepreneur, they buy the apples in the European market, the original cheap price will drive up because the demand was just increased, right? So the demand increased in the European market for the apples, and the price the price will raise up in the Europe. However, the apples in the US, the price will go down, right? So this is kind of the mechanism behind the law of the one price. In the equilibrium, like we said in last week, in the equilibrium, people tend to believe that there's no arbitrage of opportunity on the market. If the market is efficient, that means the opportunity of the arbitrage has already been picked up. Somebody has already before you to see that opportunity, so that you have no way to profit. Okay? In a chapter 13, we apply this mechanism. We apply this idea in the currency. Remember, we could have the choice to deposit our asset in a domestic bank or to deposit our asset in a foreign bank. This is kind of the idea of the arbitrage as well. If the domestic bank's interest rate, the return rate is higher, I will pour my asset into the domestic market. But when the supply of the money increase, the interest rate will decrease in the domestic market, right? And then the foreign market, on the other hand, they will try to raise their interest rate to attract more deposit to their bank, so that the two interest rate they supposed to converge with each other. That is the idea of the arbitrage in the previous chapter in a foreign currency, right? So that's the meaning of this statement. The arbitrage can occur in international good market, right? So for example, any kind of a goods, the car, the computer, or the fruit, the apple. Just as in international financial market, that's the topic that we discussed last week, right? So therefore, the price of the goods in different countries expressed in common currency may have a tendency to be equalized, right? So if the same good, think about that, the same good, like the same apple you buy in Europe and in the US, in the same currency, they should be equal to each other. If not, people will buy low and sell high and eliminate their price differences. The spread will be eliminated, right? But this, of course, is given on the assumption that Apple is the same in Europe and in the US. In reality, we know this is not the case, right? Maybe somebody has the preference of the Europeans' goods. For example, the clothes, the fashion goods, than the US fashion goods or the clothes, right? But here we need to assume that there's a frictionless trade market. Means what? Means the goods are identical. There's no tariff. There's no distortion on the market, so that people could easily engage in the arbitrage behavior. Okay, so if we use this idea to apply to a single goods, the type of the equalization is referred to as the law of one price. Okay, so this one in textbooks, it's acronym, it's loop. Okay. On the other hand, if every single goods they have the law of the one price, the law of the one price of every single goods holds, what is the price level? How do we calculate a price level in one of the country? What is the index that we usually use in macroeconomics? Have you learned the consumer price index that's called CPI? Did you learn this one in the principle of macroeconomics? Yes or no? Yes. Good. Can somebody remind me what's the formula of CPI? Or just the idea of the CPI? You don't have to tell me this. So CPI is the weight average of each of the goods, right? So say that I have a basket of the goods. So a basket is an imaginary basket. So a basket of a good could be car, right? Rice, apple, computer in one of the country. And then use what? Use their share in the market, right? So you have the share in the market, which is the weight, times their price to sum up, right? So think about that. If every goods, their law of the one price of the every goods holds, a basket of the goods, the price level in each of the country should be equal to each other as well, right? Of course, this is in a very ideal world that there's no, there's a, like frictionless, no, no distortion on the market. The goods are identical, and the market a perfect competition. But those two ideas, they're supposed to be the same. This just apply to one single good, and this have multiple single. This one is just a country from a perspective of a country. That's multiple goods. So apply to an entire basket of goods, it is called the theory of purchasing power parity. And this one, the acronym is PPP. So in this chapter, we will develop a simple theory based on the idealized world of frictionless trade. So no tariff, no distortion, no transportation cost. And also no transaction cost, right? And we will start from the law of the one price, and then we will move on to the basket of goods, the purchasing power parity. That's the first sub-chapter in chapter 14. Okay, so that's to think about what's the idea. So remember that the law of the one price state that in the absence of the trade friction, under free competition and price flexibility, so the markets functions well, right? Identical goods sold in different locations must sell for the same price when expressed in a common currency. So whenever it comes to the common currency, you know which important macroeconomic variable will show up. It's the exchange rate, right? Because like we say in the previous chapter, in a world, there are multiple currencies, right? Each country, they have the different currencies. So if we want to compare the goods in common currency, we need to convert them into the same currency. So the definition of the law of the one price, you have to go over by yourself multiple times. Okay, the assumption is important, the idea is important as well. So if we use the mathematical equation to see how do we represent the law of the one price, here is it. So the Q, okay. So for example, we are looking at good G. So this could be anything. So remember, this is just one of the goods in US and Europe. Okay? And this is the price of the good G. So P sub G sub EUR is the price of the good G in Europe. Right? So this is our location number one. That's Europe, foreign country. Right? Another price of this good G, it's in domestic. So that's price of good G in the US. Right? This, the price in the Europe, are supposed to represent in euro dollar. Right? So how do we compare them? By using the common currency. You could choose either you are using the euro or you are using the US dollar. So by a convention, we think that using US dollar is more straightforward to us, right? So you need to times the exchange rate between the euro and dollar, right? So let's go back a little bit of this exchange rate. What's the meaning of this exchange rate? If I write like here, like this, dollars backslash euro, that means how much, like E dollar per euro, right? So now you see on the right hand side, the denominator, the unit of the denominator is dollar, right? The good G's price in the US. And the unit in the numerator is converted to the US dollar as well, right? Because price is in the unit of euro. Now I times the exchange rate. So this product become a dollar, right? So you see the unit in the numerator is dollar. The denominator, the unit in the denominator is dollar. Those two are supposed to be able to cancel out with each other. So what is this at the left hand side? This becomes the real term. A real term means I get rid of the effectiveness of the price, right? So that means how much QUS you are. So what does this mean? The real exchange rate of the good G in Europe versus in the US. So 1 unit of the good G in Europe can exchange for Q unit of the good G in the US. Okay, if you're using the convention in the exchange rate, this is just identical. 1 unit of the good G in the euro could exchange Q unit of the good G in the US. Okay? So if you think about the good G is just the currency, this one is supposed to be the exchange rate as well. Right? But now we're looking at the goods that's different from the currency. We're looking at other goods. So we call good G, this good G could be computer, could be car, could be fruit, could be rice. We assume it's identical. Okay, and most important things is that if the law of the one price holds, if the law of the one price holds, that means this ratio is supposed to equal to 1. Right? Go back to the definition one more time. What's the real exchange rate, okay, between the good G in US and Euro? One unit of good G sell in Euro is equal to Q unit of good G in the US. Right? So if the law of the one price holds, Q supposed equal to 1. That means one unit of the good G in the Euro supposed to be equal to 1 goods of the unit in the US. So 1 unit of the goods that you buy in the Europe could exchange for 1 unit of the goods that you buy in the US. That's the idea. Okay, so now we could do a little bit of the manipulation of this equation. You see, so E is the exchange rate between those two currencies. Divided by, so equal to 1. So if we put the denominator to the right hand side, this could be right like this. Right? Let's take a look. So if we rearrange the equation of the price equality, this is what we get. Right? The original PPP, it's look like this. And we say if the law of the one price holds, this is supposed to equal to 1. So then just do a little bit of the manipulation in algebra. Exchange rate between the two locations, between two currencies, are equal to this. Right? So how do we interpret this? The exchange rate is equal to the ratio of the goods price. Okay, and here we only look at one good, which is good G. So you can imagine that in the PPP, in the purchase power parity, what is this term and this term are going to be? this term are going to be a weight sum of the good price, right? The price index in the US. And this term are going to be the price index in the Europe, right? So exchange rate between two countries or between two regions or between two currency, it's equal to the price index ratio. That is the law of one price counterpart in macroeconomics. That's the PPP. Okay, I always feel like it's easier for me to learn it at the same time because they are just the same. Law of one price and the purchase power parity. If you try to demonstrate the purchase power parity, you just aggregate all of the goods, given the assumption that the law of the one price for all of the goods holds. Okay? So let's move on to the next slide. The principle of the purchasing power parity is the macroeconomic counterpart. The macroeconomic counterpart to the microeconomic law of one price. Right? So to express PPP algebraically, we could compute the relative price of two baskets of the goods. Instead of two goods, now we are comparing two baskets of the goods. So what does it mean? If I have the price level in two countries, right? For example, I have the price level in the Europe and I have the price level in the US. How do we calculate all the price level? I use an imaginary basket of the goods and calculate their weight to sum up, right? To weight average their price. So I could find out the overall price index. Right? So here, the US price of the basket expressed in dollar. Right? Of course, the US goods are sell and buy in the US dollar. Once again, multiple goods in the Europe, the goods in the basket right now, I'm looking at their price supposed to be labeled in euro. Right? So weight average of all of the goods in the basket supposed to give me an index that's also labeled in the euro. Right? And remember that whenever we try to compare the real exchange rate or the relative price of the basket in the euro versus US, we need to put it into the common currency, right? So one thing that is our old friend is the exchange rate between euro and the US dollar, right? So this term is labeled in euro. You tie the exchange rate between US and Europe. So now this term becomes labeled in US dollar. So once again, the numerator, the unit is dollar. Denominator, the unit is dollar. Right? So dollar and dollar, they should be able to cancel out. So this one will give you the real exchange rate of the two countries' goods in a basket. Right? So if this one is equal to 1, we call PPP holds. Okay? There's no arbitrage when the basket is the same price in both locations, right? I try to repeat over and over again. If there's no arbitrage when basket is the same price in both locations, that is, this is equal to 1. Right? So the goods in the baskets, their price in a common currency is equal to each other. means the same goods that you buy in Europe, you could exchange for 1 unit of the same goods that you buy in US. So PPP holds means the price level in two countries are equal when expressed in common currency. This is called absolute PPP. Okay, so the idea of the PPP is easy. So the idea of the PPP is 1 equal to this. If you manipulate it, PS. Right? So now what? Think about why we need to know PPP. So we don't know, if we don't know what's the exchange rate, if we know the price index in the US and the price index in the Europe, could we figure out this one? The answer is yes, right? So this is the model that we are going to explore in the future. If I know the price level in the US, if I know the price level in the Euro, can I predict the exchange rate between them? The answer is yes. Okay? Okay, so here just another term, but represent the same thing. The real exchange rate. The real exchange rate is the relative price of the basket. Okay, the basket of the goods. The U.S. exchange rate QS slash euro is equal to this. Tell us how many U.S. baskets are needed to purchase one European basket. Right, so Q US EUR. So once again, the first one by the convention in the books, this one is the home country. This one is the foreign country, right? Remember, we write this one in exchange rate. This means what? This means E dollar equal to 1 euro, right? So this means 1 unit of the European basket of the goods could exchange for Q units of US basket of the goods. That is the idea of the real exchange rate. So it's the exchange rate between the same goods. Okay? Okay. So the second bullet point here, the exchange rate for the currency, it's a nominal concept. Okay, so nominal means related to the price or the currency. But the real exchange rate, it's a real concept, right? So that means it's how many units of the goods itself in exchange for how many units of the good. Okay. So if you go back to the chapter 13, everything is the same. The real exchange rate has the terminology similar to the nominal exchange rate. So if the real exchange rate raise, that means the whole has experienced a real depreciation against the other country's goods. Foreign country's good. Right? On the other hand, if Q, this term, decrease, falls, that means the whole has experienced a real appreciation against foreign basket of the goods. Yeah, Jake.
Jeff, when you say falls or depreciates or appreciates, or actually in this case Q falls or rises, what is that compared to? Falls and rises compared to what? Or falls and rises from what?
Well, just Q, if Q increase, that's called the real exchange rate rises. So for example, previously that's equal to 1, now become
Right.
2. So that means that's it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so if we could use this as an example, maybe take a look. So think about that. If previously the real exchange rate between US and the Europe it's equal to 1, what does it mean? Means a basket of the European goods, right? 1 unit basket of European goods could exchange for how many? Could exchange for 1 basket of US goods, right? So now, if the exchange rate, real exchange rate become 2, that means now real exchange rate become 2. That means 1 unit basket of the European goods could exchange for 2 basket of the US goods, right? So that means what? The basket of the US goods depreciate, right? The value of the US goods depreciate. Initially, you could exchange for one basket of the European goods by 1 basket of the US goods. But now you need to use 2 baskets of the US goods to exchange for 1 basket of the European goods, so that the US basket of the goods are depreciated. That is the idea here. The value of the Q increase, right? The value of the Q rises. That means the goods value actually depreciate against the foreign goods. On the other hand, if the Q this term decrease, right, drops, falls, that means you could use less of the home goods to exchange for the same amount of the foreign goods. So what does it mean? What does it imply? It implies the domestic goods value increase. So the domestic goods appreciate against the foreign goods. Okay? So once again, PPP requires that the real exchange rate is equal to 1. Okay? If the real exchange rate is below 1, then foreign goods are cheap relative to home goods. So in this case, the US dollar is said to be strong, the euro is weak, and we say the euro is undervalued. Okay, so just less than 1, euro is undervalued. And on the other hand, if this is the case, by real exchange rate, this one is the case, then we say euro is overvalued. Okay, just the another term to explain the real or the relative price of the goods or the real exchange rate. Okay, if the PPP holds, right? So only 3 cases, right? Okay, so let me just organize it. So 3 cases. this value could, the real exchange rate could either larger than 1 or equal to 1, or could either smaller than 1, equal to 1, or larger than 1. Okay, so in this case, we call PPP holds. In this case, the first case, we call Europe undervalued. Here, we call Europe is overvalued. Okay. So once again, we can rearrange a no arbitrary equation for the equality of the price level of this. So Q equal to 1, right? So now I know the exchange rate between those two currencies and the price level of two countries. Their relationship should be like this. So if I move the price of the foreign countries to a denominator in the right-hand side, the exchange rate should be the ratio of the price level in two regions. Right? So purchasing power parity implies that exchange rate at which two currencies trade equals the relative price level of the two countries. Okay, important. So this is the absolute PPP. Okay, so how do we use an economic model to figure it out? So like I said before, so now since usually the macroeconomic variables like price level will be reported by each of the country, right? So people in the Bureau of the Statistics, they will calculate out the price level for each calendar year. So annually, they will publish what's the price index, or like monthly, they will let you know what's the change in the consumer price index. So you will have a sense to know that what's the price level change. So if you have the home price level and you have a foreign price level, and then could you predict the exchange rate? You can, right? So now in economics, we call those variables, known variables are exogenous variable. So sometimes this is called parameters. Meaning, if I know this number and this number, then by PPP, I should be able to figure out the exchange rate. Okay. And by how? By this. Right? But remember, PPP has a lot of the assumption that it's too idealized. So in the short run, PPP probably is not a very good theory, and it performed very poorly in the short run, and we will discuss the reasons behind it. Okay, and this is just the idea of how you could apply this in the economic model. Yeah, Jake.
So is that the part in the chapter about the Big Mac index?
Yes.
And how there's like estimation, but not to go by the numbers per se?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So the Big Mac index is actually calculate the deviation of the PPP. I will talk about this later on today, I hope. Okay? Okay. So since we already discussed the absolute the absolute PPP, right? So now we need to talk about what's the relative PPP. So whenever there's a relative, means we think about the change rate of the variable. Okay, so what's the change rate in the price level? In macroeconomics, we call the change rate in the price level inflation or deflation, right? Or the rate of the inflation. That's the same thing. Right? Rate of the inflation. And if you're using mathematic terms, usually it's this. The change of the price level over the original price level times 100%. Right? So now we have the original absolute PPP, and we try to figure out the exchange rate change. What is their relationship with the price change in the US and the price change in the Euro? Okay? Okay. So let me just walk you through one of the shortcut. If you have ever taken the calculus, there's the easiest way to do so. So you simply just take the natural log for the both hand side. Right? So this will become this. Right? So natural log A divided by B are going to equal to natural log A minus natural log B. Right? And the next step, if you take the derivative with respect to t, right? Just take respect to t, so take the derivative with respect to this. Take the derivative, you will get the change rate of the exchange rate. It's equal to this. That is the shortcut. But if you have no background in the calculus, it's okay. Let's take a look at how the textbook walk us through. So first of all, in terms of the relative PPP, we would like to know what's the exchange rate change. Okay, so exchange rate change. We use delta E to represent, right? By its definition, what is delta E T here? Means the new exchange rate in the next period minus original exchange rate period T, right? Divided by this. Okay, so the rate of the change of the exchange rate in home is the rate of the exchange rate depreciation in home given by this. Okay, so if you think about that, why this one is called the rate of the depreciation of the nominal exchange rate? If this one is larger than this one, this is going to be larger than 0. So E T plus 1 larger than E T, that means dollar depreciate against euro, right? Okay, so now this is the rate, the exchange rate change. Okay, on the left, in the left hand side, we done this part. We figure out this. Now we move on to the right-hand side. How do we figure out the change rate of the US price level and the change rate of the Europe price level? So the books just tells you directly the rate of the change ratio of the price level equals to the rate of the change of the numerator minus the denominator's change rate. Okay, so this term on the right hand side. Right, so here I want to figure out what's their change rate. This term. The book just tells you it's equal to this minus this. Okay, so here, two change rate, you minus with each other, so it's the difference between the rate, right? So if you expand it, what's the meaning of the delta? Delta means the new minus old one, right? So the change in the level, right? So price level in the US in T+1 period minus the price level in the US in T divided by the price level in the US in period T, right? So T you could treat it as an origin date, and T+1 is just the new date, right? So we now take a look, switch our focus on the relative PPP. That means everything has to be changed in percentage. That's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so this term, the ratio of the inflation in US, right? So the change of the price level, right? The percentage of the change in the price level, this we call inflation rate. And remember, this is in the US. The second term, this one, by the same token, what is numerator? The price level in a new period of the time, T+1, minus the price level in the original period of the time, which is T, divided by original price level. Right? So if you combine the right-hand side and the previously left-hand side, this, what would you get? You will get this term, right? So the rate of the depreciation of the nominal exchange rate, it's equal to the inflation differential. Okay. I actually could give you a proof, but I don't think this is. Do you guys want me to show you how this one, like why the ratio between US and Europe price, relative price level in two countries, their exchange rates are going to be those two? The book was explained in a footnote, but I think if you yes or no, you want me to go over it or not? But because that will take take some time. Okay for now, so that means no, right? Okay, for the office hour. Okay, cool. Yep. Okay, no problem. Okay. So let's move on. Okay. So if equation 14:1 holds for the level of the exchange rate of the price, so what's 14:1? So exchange rate 14:1 is the absolute, right? So absolute PPP is E. This is absolute, right? 14:1. This is absolute, and this one, it's the relative, right? So now you take a look of the change rate of the depreciation of the nominal exchange rate. It's equal to the differences of the inflation rate between two countries. Okay, so this way of the expressing PPP is called relative PPP, and it implies that the rate of the depreciation of the nominal exchange rate equals the differences between the inflation rate of the two countries. So now you see that the inflation rate of two countries play an important role in determining the direction of the exchange rate move. Okay, so now the biggest point in PPP is that we connect the price level, the macroeconomic variables in two different countries. Right? We connect the macroeconomic variables into our exchange rate determination theory. So now you know how to predict the exchange rate in an ideal assumption. Okay, so this is just using the data to show you that this is just the evidence of the PPP in the long run. Okay, so on the vertical axis, rate of the depreciation in 1975 to 2005, and this is like the sample is 82 countries. So this is like each point is one of the country doing trade with the US. Okay, and the vertical axis means their rate of the depreciation, right? So the nominal exchange rate depreciation. Country I, right? And the left hand, the horizontal axis, what? The horizontal axis is equal to their inflation rate differences, right? So country I could be any country. So it could be UK. So if you plug in UK, so this one will be pounds, right? So the rate of the depreciation of the pounds and the US dollar and the differences between US and the UK probably is here or somewhere here. And given in a sample, the countries, 82 countries, we could figure out that in the long run, the PPP holds, right? Because every point on the 45-degree line means the x-coordinate value is equal to the y-coordinate value, right? Even though not every green dots here are on the line, but they are very close to the fitting line here. So that means the PPP supposed to hold in the long run. However, if we take a look of the short run, okay, how do we take a look of the short run? So here it's the specific country pair is the US and UK. So the green line is the relative price level. And the red line is just this. So if we're using the absolute PPP, the green line supposed to be overlap with the red line, right? But the data didn't show us this. As you could see, the relative price between US and UK move like relatively stable, whereas the exchange rate, the nominal exchange rate, fluctuates more. But if you take a look of the long run term of the exchange rate, for example, if you take in a moving average of the exchange rate, it's supposed to look like this. So once again, this just shows you that the PPP, it probably holds better in the long run and deviate more in the short run. Okay, and some of the reason for why PPP doesn't hold in the short run. So we have 4 reasons that mentioned in the books. The first one is the transaction cost. Okay, so the transaction cost means what? Means the arbitrary, it's not, you cannot do the arbitrary like we said in the theory, right? So for example, if you buy an apple in Europe and you buy an apple in the US, and if you try to arbitrage between 2 markets, you have to count into the transportation cost, right? So you ship the apple from the European markets to the US, you have to pay the shipping company the shipping fee, right? So that the cost of the transportation and one of the policy distortion on the market, such as tariff or quotas, right, or duties, other costs will will jeopardize or will violate our assumption in the PPP. So this is one of the example of the transaction cost. So this makes arbitrage harder, right? Secondly, some of the goods, they are non-tradable. For example, one of the most significant goods is what? Think about the real estate. If you count the real estate price, right, the housing price, into your basket of the goods, if you count housing into the basket of goods, do you think that the PPP could still hold? The answer is not, right? Because of what? Because you cannot buy the house in Europe and then sell it in the US, right? Those goods are not movable. This is not a question about the transaction cost or transportation cost. It's simply just make no sense if you try to arbitrage the housing, the real estate in London to the US, right? You cannot buy the house in London and then sell it in the US. Maybe you could, like using some of the contract, but in the most of the case, that's that's implausible, right? So non-traded good has a lot. For example, real estate, one part. The second part, the services. Here, the books tells you the services in a restaurant, it cannot be arbitrage across the market, right? So if you go to the restaurant, those food are arbitrageable, but the service of the chef and the waiters, they are not, because the U.S. waiter cannot, or usually cannot serve in the Europe or the rest of the world, right? So this is our second case why the why the PPP does not works like we predict theoretically, because we have a lot of goods, they are non-tradable. Yeah, Jake.
Share a story and see what you think. I know for a fact in Europe, on military bases, for example, the waiters and waitresses there will accept euros and dollars.
Yeah, but they cannot serve at the same time in the U.S. and at the same time in Europe, right? Of course, they could accept the different currency, but their services as a good. If you treat their services as a good,
right,
like those goods cannot be moved around the market. Can they?
I understand.
Yeah. Could you buy the services? Like if you walk into the US, it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. If you walk into the US restaurant, can you like ask for the services, like, well, you probably, this will run into a lot of trouble. Say that I want a European waiter, or I want a European style waiting service.
Yeah.
This probably it's improbable.
Why would you?
Right? Yeah. So the services itself, it's non-traded good. That's usually the convention in economics. So for example, another service, for example, the wireless services, the cell phone companies, their technology and their services are considered to be the non-traded good as well. So if you counted the your mobile phone, your monthly fee across the different country, you will see that the PPP will not hold as the tradable goods. So the tradable goods will be easier for us to construct the PPP, to show the evidence of the PPP hold in the long run. Whereas the non-traded goods will not so easy for us to. You will see the price differences even though you count into the exchange rate. That's the meaning here. Why the PPP will not hold in the long run. That's the second point for non-traded goods. Is it? Okay, thank you. Okay, and the third one is the market is in perfect competition, right? So some of the market are not perfect competition, so that the market will distort it, so that the PPP assumptions violate, so that the result of the PPP cannot hold in reality. And the price thickness is just one of the facts that we will see in the market, as always, right? Because change of the price, it's always slowly. Because you change of the price, you encounter the other costs. For example, if you change one of the example will be the menu price, right? So if you frequently change the price on the menu, some of the customers, they are not get used to the price change, so that you might lose some of the business because of you change the price frequently. So that the price, they will have some of the inertia, like the price will change, but change in a very slow way. Okay, that's something we'll mention in the macroeconomic textbook as well. Okay, so these are four important, not important, but four reasonable explanation of why the PPP it's not hold. It's usually not performs very well in the short run data. Okay, and then we move on to the last part of this sub-chapter. This is called the Big Mac Index. Okay, so I think one of the students just mentioned in the beginning of the class today. So how do they construct this? So you see, so PPP, we need to find out the basket of the goods, right? So this, the Economist, the magazine, they just focus on one of the goods, which is the McDonald's Big Mac. It's the burger. So, McDonald's is a global franchise, right? So they sell the burgers in every countries. So of course, their burgers in that country have to be labeled in the foreign currency, right? So now you should have the data of the exchange rate, right? This is not hard to get. And then if you could get the price of the Mac in the foreign market, for example, this is Big Mac. I think they include Taiwan. Yeah. Yes. So sell the Big Mac in Taiwan in New Taiwan dollar 102. Okay, and then Big Mac in the US, right? So the Big Mac in US, this is something you could easily get if you focus on the McDonald's menu, right? So by this, you could figure out the Big Mac's index. So if we expand out this, what is this one? So PUS, right? So Big Mac exchange rate between the US dollar and the foreign dollars times the Big Mac price in that country minus this. Okay, so what's in the numerator? Take a look. Oh, okay. What's in the numerator? Numerator is the deviation of the PPP, right? Or law of the one price. If the law of the one price hold, this term are equal to what? So previously we call this as good G, right? Now good G just Big Mac in a McDonald's, right? So if the law of the one price or the PPP is hold, what is the numerator supposed to be? If you compare the identical goods in common currency, right? You convert the foreign market's price by using the exchange rate, and you minus the price of the goods in the US. If the law of the one price hold, what is this number supposed to be? This is supposed to be equal to equal to equal to 0, right? Hello? So is this clear? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jay. Well, I need another people's response. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I thought I just lose my connectivity at the time. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Because now the goods that I'm focusing on it's Big Mac, right? Exactly. So something in the Starbucks coffee. Exactly. Because Big Mac supposed to be identical in everywhere in the world, right? So it's a good object for us to test whether the PPP holds or not, or whether the law of the one price holds or not. If they are identical, the only difference is the the currency used in that country, right? So the one you sell in China supposed to be able to exchange for one you sell in the U.S. But what do you think about this research result? The result of this one is the PPP actually doesn't really hold. Some of the countries, their currency, if you're using the Big Mac as the good you're looking at, are overvalued, and some of the country are undervalued, right? So this column, if the PPP holds, this column is supposed to very close to 0. But now we see not too many. Okay? Not too many. So once again, this just shows that the PPP, because of its assumption, is too ideal. So, or because we only look at one of the goods, which is a Big Mac in the previous example, so that the low one price does not really hold. Okay? So that will conclude our first part of chapter 14. So that's the law of the one price and the purchasing power parity. Is there any questions?
I don't have a question, but I was on the Big Mac index. I think it was suggested that KFC chicken was a better proxy for it because, like a Big Mac, like beef isn't something that's produced everywhere, and there's lots of different styles, preference styles to what they want on top of it. Whereas KFC chicken is pretty similar everywhere, and chickens are raised in more places. So it was like, I think it was suggested that that was a better, and it's in almost as many countries. Actually, I think KFC, they said it was in more countries than McDonald's. So I think it was suggested that was a better one to use.
I think you're right, yeah. Because beef are more localized. So they will purchase the beef, like the Big Mac sells in different countries, actually not the same goods. Is that your point, Peter? The Subway is in more country. Yeah, if like more countries supposed to be like it's a good things to calculate out the law of the one price. And the similarity of the goods, it's important things as well. So like Peter said, maybe chicken, it's more identical across the countries instead of like Big Mac because they use the beef, right? And beef, usually you won't import it directly from the US. Maybe you will buy from your local market. So if you buy from a local market, the cost of the beef will different from the McDonald's in different countries, so that their price will be different, so that the price of law of the one price will be different so that the law of the one price will not hold in the Big Mac case. So, okay, actually Subway is in more countries, so should we use subs? Yes, but
It was a half joke.
okay. That is supposed to be a joke. I see. I take it too seriously. Yeah, but that may be a good idea. Yeah, if you want to write it as on a policy brief, I'm totally agree with it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want, I mean, take a look of if is there any research on the PPP that using different kind of American franchise. I think there might be some of the paper have done that before. Like just compare Starbucks, KFC, McDonald's, which one is a better proxy for testing the PPP.
Yeah, as Peter says, Starbucks, so that'd be interesting.
Yeah, take a look of the I don't know, maybe you could just Google it a little bit, and then if there are some of the materials that you can write on, that would be a very good topic. Okay. So thank you for the feedback. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jake, for the feedback. Thank you. Okay. So we probably have 20 minutes left on today's lecture. Okay. So why don't we just move to the second part of the chapter 14, which is the beginning of the new cases model. Like tells you. So what's the relationship between the price and the exchange rate? So previously, PPP tells us what's the relationship between the exchange rate change and the price differential, inflation differential across the country, right? So you will naturally want to ask, so how do we determine the price level in one of the country? So I told you before that the price level is calculated by the weight average of the basket of the goods, right? But that's just part of the reason. The other part of the government, they actually have the control of the price level in the society as well. So let's take a look of the monetary approach. So like I said, so what determines lowest price level? Okay, so monetary theory supplies an answer. In the long run, price levels are determined in each country by the relative demand and the supply of the money. Okay, so this section recaps the essential elements of the monetary theory and show how they fit into our theory of exchange rate in the long run. So PPP tells us what? PPP tells us the exchange rate could be pinned down if we know the price level in two different regions or two different countries, right? So for example, this is the easiest one, or the PPP could be written as the change rate in the exchange rate, the change in the exchange rate that's equal to the change of the price level minus the foreign change of price level, right? But now we are asking, how do we know this? Okay, so this we need to take a look of the monetary market. So whenever there's a turn of the market, we need to take a look of the demand and supply side, right? So let's take a look. Let's think about what's the function of the money. So in a book, in the classical macroeconomic books, it will tell you money has three key functions. One is the store of the value, one is the unit of the account, and one is the median of the exchange. Okay? So store of the value means what? You use to buy the goods and service in the future, right? So you can save it into your deposit account. You can deposit into your saving account, right? And the opportunity cost of holding the money is what? If you're holding the cash, that means you give up the opportunity to save your money into the bank, right? So the opportunity cost for holding the money holding the cash or holding the money is actually the interest rate, right? So if the interest rate right now is higher, you tend to deposit your money more. You tend to deposit more money into the bank so that you could get more interest from the bank. If right now, this is the in fact, this is the truth. Right now, the interest rate is very low, so you will try to hold your money in a checking account, or you could just hold the cash, right? Because even you deposit a lot of money into the bank, you will get very small amount of the interest. So the opportunity cost for holding the money in the current period of the time in the United States is quite low, right? Secondly, money gives us the unit of account. So this is obvious, right? So everything is priced in the unit of the money, right? So that's what the goods are quoted. So money is a medium of the exchange. That's also obvious, right? So with the invention of the money that we don't need the double coincidence, right? So if the people wants to buy the clothes and you want to buy the food, you won't really need to find somebody really wants to use the clothes to exchange for the food. Instead, you could just go to the market and then you could sell your clothes in exchange for some of the cash, and then to bring the cash to one of the food uh, store to buy the food. So you don't need to have double coincidence, right? So this, right? So money is a tool of the medium of the exchange as well. Okay, so the measurement of the money, and this is just the term, what is the money? What's the real money? So you could say it's the currency in circulation. So M0 is the lowest amount of the money supply. Okay, and M0 is defined as the currency in circulation plus the private bank's cash reserve. As we know that the private bank's cash reserve is usually very close to zero. So M0 or M0, on the base money, sometimes it's referred as the currency in circulation. Okay, and M1 is just the M0 plus deposit, demand deposit, traveler's check, and other higher liquid deposit. And M2 is the broadest definition of the money. It's equal to M1 plus less liquid deposit, including saving and small time deposit. Okay, the supply of the money, in practice, a country's central bank control the money supply. Okay, of course, central bank, one of their responsibilities is to print the money or to sell the bonds to the market, right? So if they sell the bonds to the market, they can collect the money back. But if they buy the bonds from the market, that means they could put their bills into the market, right? So one of the central bank's responsibilities is to control the money supply. Okay. So let's move to the model. So demand for the money, we assume that the money demand is motivated by the need to conduct transaction. Okay, so people hold the money because we believe that the incentive for them to hold the money is they want to do the transaction, right? So this is the which function of the money that we just go over. Supposed to be the median of exchange, right? So money demand is equal to the income, nominal income times the constant. So this is called the quantity theory of the money. If you have the higher income, you're supposed to would like to have more money. The demand of the money is supposed to be higher. Right now, we just put this term as a constant. And this term, in the end, in the general model, this term will be a function of the interest rate. L represents the liquidity. Liquidity. Okay, so money demand is equal to the liquidity times nominal income. So if you put the price to the left-hand side, real money demand is equal to the liquidity times income. Okay, and both this one, so if the liquidity is higher, you will have higher money demand. And if your income is higher, you will have higher money demand. Okay. So this is called the demand for real money, right? So you switch, originally P is here, you switch P into the denominator in the left-hand side. So divide previous equation by P, the price level, we can derive the demand for the real money balances. So real money balances are simply a measure of the purchasing power of the stock of the money in terms of the goods and the services. Right? So money demand divided by the price level is the purchasing power of goods and services. And it's proportional to the income. Right? If your income is higher, your purchasing power, of course, will be higher. Okay? The demand of so let's move to the equilibrium in the monetary market or money market. The condition for the equilibrium in money market is simple to state. The demand is equal to the supply, right? So demand of the money, which we use MD, denoted as MD, it's equal to the supply, right? So if we add it into the previous condition, right? So MD is equal to LPY, and now the equilibrium condition is M equal to MD, so money supply is equal to LPY. So the real money supply, right? So this is nominal supply, nominal money supply divided by the price level is equal to the constant of the liquidity times the income. Right, so this is the equilibrium condition of the money market. So here is our main role, leading actor. Right, so we try to figure out the price in the US and the price of the Europe. So if we're using the monetary equilibrium condition, right? So MP is equal to Ly, and just add the subscript to each term. You could find out what? You could find out PUS is actually equal to MUS divided by LUS. Right, so this is this one. So by the same token, it's this one. Okay? So as you could see, if the US money supply increase, the other things be equal, the price level in the US will increase. Right? If the income in the US increase, the price level in the US, other things be equal, will decrease. All right, so you see the government's policy right now play an important role, right? So if you increase the money supply in the market, you use the stimulus package in the market, you actually raise the money supply in the market so that you will raise the price level in the long run. And what happens if you raise the PUS in terms of using the PPP? The US dollar is supposed to depreciate, right? So monetary policy, you have to be very careful. Instead, if you're using the fiscal policy or you try to target your employment rate in a lower employment rate, it means you stimulate your production. If you make this one higher, other things being equal, the price will decrease. The price will decrease, the price level in the US will decrease. The exchange rate between the US dollar and the European dollar will drop. Or drop means the US dollar is actually appreciate against the foreign dollar. Okay, I'm running out of the time, but I will pick it up from this slides on Wednesday night. So if you have a time, please preview it and then let me know if you have any question. My goal is try to finish chapter 14 on Wednesday night, and we will move to a little bit of the chapter 15, so that we could devote our last week in Keynesian's model in chapter 16 to 18. Okay? So with that being said, thank you for showing up today, and thank you all for your feedback, and thank you for the questions. So if you still have a question on the homework, the assignment, please let me know. I will try to reply to your email. I get some of the email over the weekend because I'm busy with grading the midterm and typing up all the midterm answers, and like making the new slices. So I'm not able to reply all of them, but I will try to do it as soon as possible. All right. So if you have no question, you are free to go, and then I will see you on Wednesday night. Thank you.
Hi, Professor.
Yeah, right.